Nation in Conversation, proudly brought to you by AFGRI, Monsanto, Nedbank, Senbes, Engine, Grain SA, and John Deere.
Welcome to Nation in Conversation here at the Nampo Harvest Day 2017. With me is Francois Strydom, the Group CEO of Senbes, but also the patron of Nation in Conversation. Francois, this was your brainchild 5 years ago. Let's start at this year's press launch. You must be a proud man of what this has achieved.
Surely, Theo, if I look back and think back where we started, mainly a small little conversation platform talking to agriculture, and now Monday night looking around the room and seeing the personalities that's involved with Nation in Conversation now, and the different media platforms that we're touching, and now that we're at the end of the week, looking at the amount of hits we got on the different platforms, it's astounded me to listen to people who has never been engaged with agriculture, and to listen how they passionately speak about agriculture. I mean, and that, if I think back of where we started, this is really what we wanted to achieve, to infuse ordinary South Africans to also talk about the food value chain, to realize what that importance of it in the national economy is, and the way that it can transform individual lives. So yes, this was certainly a revelation. But yes, I'm also already thinking, how can we make this bigger and better? How can we have a bigger impact? Yes, that is sort of one of the overarching ideas that I found this year. The nation is starting to think solution-driven.
So solution-driven, and I want to come back to that point. That solution-driven conversation came from government as well as from the private sector. It was almost as if people were saying that there's certain things that needs to be done. And I was struck by the effect that both from government and from commercial agriculture, there was a coming together. Did you experience that?
It's absolutely right with what you're saying. There was almost a us and them. It's government against industry, against private sector, different factions. And I think the moment where we are in our history now is that the populace, if you can unite them through certain issues, it's this realization that things are now in our hand. We must do it. We can't wait for somebody to do it. And if we think things go wrong, how do you change that? You start by changing your individual space, where you can touch and where you can change. Do that, and that impetus will follow through. If there are gaps in our perception of where we should be and what should be done, I think this is the way to change it, is to, through a platform like this, in a small way, generate enthusiasm and the realization that we're the guys that have to change it.
I felt there was not that almost anger or aggression in any of the conversations. There was a understanding of the various positions, a recognition that government has failed in a lot of situations, but also an invitation from government to the private sector to focus on solutions and on partnerships. Surely one must be optimistic about that.
If I take what you say, because I definitely agree with that, if you just take that to the practical level, I mean, one of the interesting things that I found is this whole drive of land ownership and how that cascaded into also the cosmopolitan area where the call was heard throughout. Well, why don't we start with just urban, just the ordinary urban dweller? If they could own the little plot that they live on, at least they start somewhere. They have a security base against which they can start leveraging and start, to change their life. So this is not an ag issue. This is a bigger national issue. So that was really exciting.
And it had two underlying principles: the principle of private ownership, which I think sometimes people debate, but the principle of transferring wealth to the individual occupier, and that could make a massive difference. But if we take it back to agriculture, I think the challenge remains in agriculture is to how do we make it an asset that everybody shares in? And I think the discussion took that forward.
I see that, Theo, the thing is, it's how competitive South Africa Incorporated is against other nations, because this is really what's happening. We're competing against each other for share of the world market. I mean, we have this massive unemployment and disparity in income problem. So if we can step up our own production and our production change, I mean, that's the practical way in which you change it. If you just on a simple level, you import one box of frozen chicken against you produce it, because it touches the whole value chain from primary production, the financing, the production, the processing, the transport, the packaging, right through that chain. This is how we make things work.
Francois, we at the end, this is a synopsis and we're looking back at the discussions. Are you more optimistic now than you were at the beginning of the week?
Yeah, I must, at some points I must contain myself not to get ahead of it, because I realize how much work still is left. But certainly, I'm at a completely different place. I could see, and if I could just use a individual as a sort of an example of how I see Nation and Conversation working. Both Eusebius Pekaiser and Andile Khumalo, who has, I mean, absolutely no connection with agriculture. And they got involved with
Not
Nation
even
and
no connection, they in theory should be opposing the traditional agriculture
absolutely right,
way it's structured.
Yes. And how I saw them, almost hesitant, and in an hour and a half, leading a panel, almost get converted to the point where they, at the end of it, say, how can we help you? We want to get involved. And where their contact points through either social media or radio or television, where their fans and their followers react immensely, and they're overwhelmed by the reaction. This is Nation in Conversation in action.
This is what it's about. Thank you very much. That was Francois Strydom, the patron of Nation in Conversation and the Group CEO of Senves. From me, Theo Vorster, good day.
Nation in Conversation, proudly brought to you by Afgri, Monsanto, Nedbank, Senves, Engine, Grain SA, and John Deere.